Imagine you're flying over the Atlantic Ocean. Clear skies, calm winds, everything normal. Then, nothing. No mayday call, no wreckage, no bodies. Just silence. That's what happened to Flight 19 in December 1945. 5 U.S. Navy bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and vanished. The rescue plane sent to find them, it disappeared too. For decades, people called this region the Devil's Triangle. They blamed alien portals, underwater cities, time warps, and magnetic anomalies. Millions of people believe the Bermuda Triangle is the most dangerous stretch of ocean on Earth, a place that defies science itself. But what if I told you the Bermuda Triangle is one of the biggest myths in modern history? What if the real story is even stranger than the legend? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you see this story.
Let's start with what most people believe. The Bermuda Triangle is a roughly 500,000 square mile region of the Atlantic Ocean, forming a triangle between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. According to popular culture, this zone has swallowed hundreds of ships and planes without explanation. The legend really exploded in 1974 when author Charles Berlitz published his best-selling book simply called The Bermuda Triangle. It sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Berlitz claimed that dozens of vessels had vanished under mysterious, inexplicable circumstances, with no wreckage, no survivors, and no rational explanation. He pointed to cases like the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy cargo ship that disappeared in 1918 with 309 people on board. He talked about the Mary Celeste, a ghost ship found sailing perfectly intact but completely abandoned. He cited Flight 19, the Ellen Austin, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, and many more. Then came the theories. Some people said the lost city of Atlantis sits at the bottom of the triangle, and its ancient energy crystals disrupt navigation systems. Others claimed UFOs use the region as an underwater base. There were theories about methane gas explosions, rogue waves, and even a portal to a parallel dimension. TV documentaries, Hollywood films, video games, everyone jumped on board.
Let's talk about what actually happened and what the evidence really shows. First, let's deal with the most important fact. The Bermuda Triangle is not officially recognized by any major scientific or governmental organization. The U.S. Coast Guard does not acknowledge it as a specially dangerous area. Lloyd's of London, the world's most famous insurance market, the people who literally price risk for a living, does not charge higher insurance premiums for ships passing through that region. Think about what that means. The best risk analysts in the world looked at the data and said, there is nothing unusual here. So, where did the myth come from? In 1975, a librarian and researcher named Lawrence David Cushy published a landmark book called The Bermuda Triangle Mystery. Solved. Cushy did something remarkably simple that Berlitz had apparently never done. He went back to the original sources. He checked Lloyd's of London records, U.S. Coast Guard reports, newspaper archives, and naval investigation files. What he found was extraordinary. Case after case that Berlitz presented as mysterious had perfectly ordinary explanations. Explanations Berlitz simply left out. Some ships disappeared during violent storms that Berlitz never mentioned. Some vanished hundreds of miles outside the triangle altogether. Berlitz had just quietly moved them inside the boundary. Some vessels that Berlitz claimed were never found had actually been located. And several cases he cited never happened at all. They were either gross exaggerations or complete fabrications. Let's go through specific examples. Flight 19, the most famous case.
Berlitz described this as a deeply mysterious disappearance with no explanation. The reality? The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, was flying with a compass malfunction and became genuinely disoriented. Radio transcripts from that day show Taylor making confused navigation decisions, flying northeast over the Atlantic when he believed he was flying over the Gulf of Mexico. The Navy's own investigation concluded the probable cause was Taylor's navigational error. The aircraft ran out of fuel.
The aircraft ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean at night. The rescue aircraft that also disappeared? It exploded shortly after takeoff, a mechanical failure witnessed by a crew on a passing merchant ship. The USS Cyclops, a massive collier carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore, vanished in March 1918. Mysterious? Certainly sad. Supernatural? No. The ship was heavily overloaded, had a malfunctioning engine, and was sailing through a region with documented storm activity. Overloaded vessels with engine problems sinking in storms is, tragically, not a mystery. It's maritime history. The Mary Celeste. Here's the thing. The Mary Celeste was not even in the Bermuda Triangle. It was found off the Azores, which are near Portugal. It has nothing to do with the triangle at all. Berlitz included it anyway. Now here's the bigger statistical picture. The Bermuda Triangle sees enormous amounts of maritime traffic. It sits between the eastern United States, the Caribbean, and the mid-Atlantic, one of the most heavily traveled shipping and aviation corridors in the world. When you account for the sheer volume of traffic passing through that region, the rate of disappearances is not statistically unusual. The Lloyd's of London data confirms this clearly. The North Sea, certain parts of the Pacific, and several other regions actually have higher rates of maritime incidents than the Bermuda Triangle. The ocean, simply put, is dangerous everywhere.
The evidence against the Bermuda Triangle myth is remarkably solid. Cush's 1975 research remains the most rigorous investigation ever done on the subject. He cross-referenced every major case cited by Berlitz with primary source documents. His conclusion was blunt. The mystery was manufactured. Cases were distorted, relocated, or invented to fit a narrative. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has stated directly that the number of ships and aircraft reported missing in the Bermuda Triangle is not exceptional when compared to other heavily traveled regions of the world ocean. Lloyd's of London's underwriting records confirm that the triangle carries no unusual risk premium. A purely commercial judgment based purely on actuarial data and nothing else.
The U.S. Coast Guard conducted its own review and found no evidence of extraordinary disappearances. Their official position remains that weather, human error, and the physical characteristics of the sea explain the losses that have occurred there. Even the geography of the region works against the myth. The Bermuda Triangle sits over very deep water. The Puerto Rico Trench reaches nearly 27,500 feet, making it the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. When vessels sink in such extreme depths, wreckage is extraordinarily difficult to locate. What looks like a mysterious disappearance with no trace often simply means a ship sank in waters too deep for recovery. This is not supernatural. It is physics. Additionally, the Gulf Stream, one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth, flows directly through this region. The Gulf Stream moves at speeds of up to 5.6 miles per hour and can rapidly disperse surface debris across hundreds of miles. Wreckage that might otherwise be found simply gets carried away. Again, not mysterious, just oceanography. Now here is where things get genuinely interesting, because the real story of why the Bermuda Triangle myth became so powerful is arguably more fascinating than the myth itself. Charles Berlitz was not a random con artist. He was the grandson of Maximilian Berlitz, founder of the famous Berlitz language schools. He was an educated, widely traveled man who spoke multiple languages. Yet he wrote a book that researchers have described as one of the most irresponsible pieces of popular history ever published. Why? Because in the early 1970s, there was an enormous public appetite for the paranormal. Uri Geller was bending spoons on television. Eric von Daniken had just sold millions of copies of Chariots of the Gods, claiming ancient aliens built the pyramids. The cultural moment was primed for exactly this kind of story. Berlitz understood his audience. He wrote what they wanted, and the publishing industry rewarded him handsomely for it. But here is the twist that almost nobody talks about. The original article that started the entire Bermuda Triangle legend was written in 1964 by a writer named Vincent Gaddis in a pulp magazine called Argosy. Gaddis coined the term Bermuda Triangle and described it as a deadly zone. The article was sensational, largely unsourced, and wildly popular. Before Gaddis, there was no Bermuda Triangle. The concept did not exist. A journalist invented it in a pulp magazine. Berlitz turned it into a bestseller. The TV industry turned it into documentary content. And within a decade, millions of people around the world believed it was established fact. This is one of the clearest examples in modern history of how misinformation.
So let's bring this home. The Bermuda Triangle is not a portal to another dimension. There is no Atlantis powering magnetic anomalies beneath the waves. There are no alien submarines harvesting human ships. The U.S. Navy, Lloyd's of London, NOAA, and the Coast Guard all agree this region is not statistically more dangerous than any other heavily traveled stretch of ocean on Earth. What the Bermuda Triangle actually is a story about us, about how much we love a good mystery, about how easily a well-told narrative can override careful evidence, about how once an idea takes hold in popular culture, it becomes almost impossible to dislodge, even when the original sources clearly don't support it. The ships that sank in storms. The planes that disappeared ran out of fuel or suffered mechanical failure. The ocean is deep, the Gulf Stream is powerful, and the sea does not always give back what it takes. That is not a mystery. That is the nature of the ocean. But here is the real lesson, and this is what truth behind history is all about. The truth, when you actually dig into it, is never less interesting than the myth. It is always more. Because the real story of how millions of people came to believe in something that researchers disproved in 1975 and kept believing it for 50 more years tells us something profound about human psychology.